What's the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Walton, joined by Sergeant Walton. Clint, how are you?
I'm good.
You're just sleepy.
Yeah.
Last night was so weird because we were outside and I pointed up into the sky and I said, look at that satellite. And as I was looking at it, I knew for sure it was a satellite because of the trajectory and the way that it was moving. And it was heading south and it was about to approach a very bright star and then it disappeared. And I told you where the star was and you're looking and I said, just give it a second. Maybe the light's too bright from the star and then you'll see it. Well, you did see it, but in that same instant, instead of moving in one direction, it went in completely the opposite direction and started moving that way. And it was so weird.
Yeah, it was super strange to just see the whole, like, I didn't see it moving at first, but to see from what Ashley was explaining to me and then it to switch back the other way, that was really strange.
Yeah, it was. Just wanted to share that. Let's talk about trust and boundaries in first responder marriages. I saw somebody who had posted a screenshot and she was going through her husband's phone evidently, and she decided to anonymously post some of those screenshots inside of a Police Wives Facebook group. And what it was is a group chat of the officer and he's in a group chat at work. So it's a bunch of people from work. And one of the officers was basically talking down about his wife. Some might say venting about some things that his wife was doing inside of that group chat. And she felt the need, the other wife, to post this on Facebook to talk about how she doesn't like the fact that her husband is in a group chat where other husbands are venting about their wives.
You know, it's having something like that. Like, one, I'm a big proponent. You should never air your dirty laundry about your spouse or anyone else. Like there's no need for that. It's like those childish games that we play when you're in high school, is that high school drama. But at the same time, it goes full circles. Why is the wife sharing all that information on social media in a different aspect too? Like, it's all around a bad situation.
Yeah, that's interesting that you said that, because she didn't like the very thing that she was doing by posting it on Facebook. And I agree with that totally. There is this importance when it comes to the camaraderie among officers. I think that it's essential, actually. But there are also private conversations that should be kept private, because in my opinion, it definitely is this sort of breach of trust that could damage your relationship.
Well, not only that, it's one of those things, you're painting this perception. Say you have an argument with your wife or your husband and you're airing grievances against them and you're sharing that in a public format, to where now you're having all these outside influences who don't know your spouse or your significant other, and now they're going to have this preconceived perception on your spouse.
Yeah, and that female that had posted this, she had discussed it with her husband, who didn't think that there was any kind of problem with it, and he felt that she was irrational for I guess rejecting this type of behavior, and that's, I guess, why she felt the need to vent to somebody herself.
Yeah, and that's where it comes full circle. Is like, why are you're expressing this more and more? Now you're airing your own dirty laundry, and not even an avenue to where it's people that you're close with, that you're having that bond with, but to just the wide open public.
Yeah, and I look at things like this as to, like, what is the hierarchy in terms of emotion or what the root problem is. So I try to backtrack everything and I go back up to step number 1, right? And step number 1 is some sense of insecurity. So let's just talk about the wife who posted this, right? Because I'm going to venture to guess that the wife who was being talked about has absolutely zero clue about this. That's a completely separate issue with her and her husband. But let's talk about the one that had posted this, that's having the problems and concerns with her husband reacting the way that he did. I go to step 1, and there is obviously some emotional distress when it comes to him downplaying her concerns as being crazy or that she was irrational for feeling that way.
Yeah, and it comes down to her as feeling there's some that insecurities associated to their own relationship, to where you you don't know, in her mind, she could be thinking, well, what's he saying about me in that group chat?
Yeah, and some things to point out in her defense is the whole locker room culture in law enforcement is very much evident. And I think that a lot of the times it's something that's even encouraged, and this creates a really unhealthy culture.
Yeah, it's having those conversations, like, and you should never air your dirty laundry. I've said that before, like amongst your peers, amongst your subordinates or your partners, because having conversations, joking around is one thing, but not bringing in outside sources to be able to bash them or to bring up that negativity towards them, because you're just feeding that whole culture in itself.
Going up to the problem at the top level, one, I think too that wife who felt concerned about this, instead of airing that on social media herself, kind of furthering the rhetoric, right? Because she wasn't doing anything to support that wife that was being talked about. Instead, I think that something really important would have been to create some very clear boundaries with your partner. I just so happened to come across this group chat. I see that there are officers in here who are really talking bad about their wives. Can you and I sit down, because I feel really insecure about this, and these are my thoughts.
Yeah, having that open conversation, it's one of those things, like, it's not comfortable to have, but it's something that, instead of just focusing on that negativity and that everything associated, those insecurities, like, that's going to bring it to light.
Yeah, and she did voice that she tried to make mention of things. However, I don't know what the dynamics of that conversation were like. I would guess that they weren't in a strong foundation, so to speak. However, I think that it's important to make sure that when situations like this come up, that we reassure and we strengthen our marriage by, okay, I don't like this is why, and then you respond and react, and then you come to a compromise of some sort.
Yeah, having that conversation, being able to see it from both perspectives, and being able to kind of troubleshoot what those problems are and have that conversation. It shouldn't be a difficult thing if you have an ongoing communication with your spouse.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm thinking about if this were you and I, he reacted with emotion. And if you reacted to me with emotion, then, I would continue to dig in that conversation as to, why are you so defensive about this? Or why is it so meaningful for you to partake in this kind of rhetoric? Like, what else is going on here?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where it shouldn't be that emotional response. It'd be like, in seeing something like that, like, for me personally, like, I would go to the officer and say, hey, don't put stuff like that in there. If you are going through issues, like, let's talk about it. Let's see how we can address that issue. If you don't want to talk to me, like, talk one-on-one with someone to see what the actual issue is. Yeah,
that definitely shows, you're coming from a perspective of leadership, right? Because you are a sergeant. And so that would be a great intervention for somebody that does exhibit great leadership qualities within the workplace. And I think it's so important. You and I do a wonderful job when it comes to respecting our privacy, keeping our conversations amongst you and I that should be kept private. We don't ever feel the need to be validated externally. And I think that's a big problem that people have, and why you see so many people just like word vomit their emotions out on social media is because they don't feel like they have that retreat or that sense of just safety, I guess, in being able to have those conversations independently in real life.
Yeah, creating that dynamic, because it doesn't happen overnight, and it's something that you have to feed and to nourish and to make it turn into where it's just another normal conversation, to where you don't have to lead into those arguments or whatever else it may be.
Yeah, and let's just say that you did do something like this, regardless of which one of these husbands you were. I would also ask you, in regards to transparency, like, why is this? And this is a problem. And I would maybe need reassurance as to just understanding, like, why you felt the need to do this. And in the back of this person's mind, maybe she was worried that her husband was going to go and like talk shit about her. And the conversation just didn't come from a place of honesty. It just came from that place of triggered emotion instead.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to have those conversations, because it might not even be something relevant to that whole argument. It might be something else that's feeding that insecurity within your spouse, whoever it may be, to be able to say, look, this isn't the case, and I'm here to support you. How can I help build you up?
Yeah, and another thing too, before we wrap this up, is that I think it's so important to understand that when our personal conversations become this sort of squad room joke, then it helps to make it to where it will weaken the bond that spouses have. And I think that too can damage communication, because if you're holding value over a group text message like that, over what your spouse has to say in terms of concerns, then, there's bigger issues that need to be addressed. I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below. And as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.